IQ, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and tonight we are in for a real treat. Joining us is the legend himself, Edward Eckstine. Ed is the son of legendary vocalist, bandleader, jazz, and Grammy Hall of Fame inductee Billy Eckstine, so it's fair to say Ed's passion for music emerged at a very young age. His illustrious career began as a writer for Soul magazine, interviewing and writing about artists including Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, and more. Ed also spent nearly 11 years as a key member of Quincy Jones' entertainment empire, serving as executive vice president and general manager, working on projects by Michael Jackson and many other iconic artists. This was followed by an opportunity of a lifetime, joining Clive Davis's Arista Records in New York City. As vice president of A&R, he contributed to projects by Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Kenny G, Dionne Warwick, and after only 2 years, he was hired by Polygram Records CEO to create a new West Coast label, Wing Records, where he signed Vanessa Williams and Brian McKnight, just to name a few. Ed went on to become president of Mercury Records, with success on projects including Bon Jovi, John Mellencamp, and Kiss. In this role, he became the first African American to be appointed president of a major non-Black owned record company. Ed has been a voting member of the Grammys and has served on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And while all of that is extremely important to the industry, Ed's been extremely important to me and my career, serving as a mentor beginning when I was just a college sophomore. And guess what? Ed's just an all-around great guy too. So I could go on, but I promised only 15 minutes, so we'll get into question one. But really quick, Ed, before we get started, can you just share with us what you've been up to recently? Is there anything exciting that we should know about?
Hi, Rachel. When I meet that guy you just introduced, I'll say I'll be pretty impressed by him.
Yeah.
Um, what am I doing? I'm just doing stuff. I'm sort of semi-retired, but I work on some projects here and there. I've got a couple of film projects that I'm contributing to creatively. And I'm also doing some artist services stuff that involves some international touring for some consultation clients that I have. Interestingly enough, I didn't. Someone once said to me, consultant's just a polite word for meaning I'm unemployed. And I happened to be in a friend of mine's office one day who's a lawyer. And I took a phone call. And when I was in the midst of that phone call, after I hung up, my friend said to me, said, "Who was that? What are you doing, man?" And I, told him who it was and what it was. He goes, "How much did you get paid for that?" And I said, "Dude, I'm just doing it on the strength of friendship," whatever. He says, "Man," he said, "that was a fill in the blank $1,000 phone call." He said, "Man, you need to hang a shingle as a consultant." So I did. So I've been doing that. And, when people call me with stuff, if it sounds interesting and I can middleman my way in some of it, I do it. And that's really what's
Exciting
been
stuff.
occupying my times.
Nice.
Thanks.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, let's dive into question number one.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Good question.
Thank you.
On a personal note, I would say don't lose track of the things that you love and enjoy, have loved and enjoyed during the course of your life to that point, because they will fill a void for you later in life. It's important that you do them. Don't let them go for dumbass reasons. The other thing I would say on a personal level, which also sort of bleeds into a professional level, is there was once a record that was called what were once vices are now habits. Don't let your vices become habits, and don't let your vices and proclivities become habits that become a detriment to what you're trying to do in life, and particularly in your professional life. And I'm not necessarily pointing the finger at myself, but I'm just saying, there are people, it could be whatever it's gambling, drinking, drugs, whatever the case may be. Learn to temper it and to recognize it if it begins to become a problem, and get on the other side of it as quickly as you possibly can, because it will it'll screw things up for you in the long run. I've seen too too many friends, associates, had my own issues with certain things, that just, end up being, unnecessarily detriments and impediments to your forward movement and growth.
Hmm. I think
So,
especially that's great. I think especially like in this industry, there's so much pressure to be on such a straight path, such a narrow path, and know
mm,
exactly what you're doing. So it's very easy to get, mixed up, whether it be in the wrong crowd or like the wrong whatever you're doing. But I think
mm-hmm.
that's a great point.
Thank you.
With that, let's jump right into question two. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and you and I both know that it's no different in the music industry. And sometimes people think that's a bad thing, when that's not always the case. Sometimes they're good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry or A&R specifically?
Hmm. Wow. Um, well, the the dirty little secret in a negative sense is that it's a business of isms from time to time. It could be racism, sexism, ageism,
Mm,
genderism. Name your favorite ism, and it's probably you'll find it somewhere in this business. It is kind of much like life in general. It's just the realities of life. Um, the the good dirty little secret, which probably isn't that much of a secret, is it's a boatload of fun if you if you give it the proper respect. You can have an
hmm
enormous amount of fun while doing it. Uh, when I was coming up, the thing that you heard a lot was the music business and record companies were high school with paychecks. Um, and with that, we came with sort of the wild west kind of notions of people playing it, loose and free. Loose and free is great, but you have to have some kind of parameters and guardrails on what the hell you're doing. Um,
hmm
and that's one of the dirty secrets. I'll leave it at that.
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a good one. I think I agree. I have such a good time in this industry. I mean, who would want to go to live shows all the time through your job?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's a good plus.
Yeah. I'll leave it at this. There was a classic line. I think it was attributed to Mick Jagger uh, about the music business, and he said, "Yeah, the music business is a 9 to 5 job, and it's hard to tell you exactly what goes on between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m." So
Very
that's
true.
yeah, some truth to that.
Well said. Well
Yeah,
said.
indeed.
All right. So here we are at our final question already. So let's get into it.
Mm.
Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked a lot of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and questions, I'll bet there was one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would have been the answer?
Um, why do you love the music business, or do you love the music business? And if you do, why? Are you merely just doing it because it's a good gig, or is there reasons beyond that notion that you love this business?
Mhm.
But never asked that question.
Wow,
Um,
I'm surprised.
yeah, been asked sort of variations on the theme, but
Right.
never the theme, not the question exactly. Um, and I would answer that. I would have answered, or I answer that question now to say that it is yes, I do, and that or yes, I did, and I continue to. Um, and because it's sort of in my blood, because of family affiliations and all that stuff. I often said that it was kind of like family business. If your dad was a postal worker, when you sat around the dinner table at night at dinner time, dad probably talked about postal worker stuff. in
hmm
my in my family, because my dad was a performer and entertainer, when he was not on the road and he was home for dinner, he talked about showbiz stuff was talked about. So it just sort of piqued an interest at a young age. um, and it just sort of inspired me and catapulted me into it, because after I left, when I was in high school, I went to a boarding school, and after I got out of boarding school and went to college, um, I had this inherent sort of notion that what I wanted to do, I was not going to learn in school. That it was what I wanted to do. I needed to just sort of jump in and start swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the first skill that I brought to it was, aside from a love of music, was I had a good ability to write, which was something that in high school was really kind of hammered into me. So when I got to college, while I was busy sort of flunking out there and not doing what I was supposed to do, um, I just immersed myself in music, and trying to meet as many people as I possibly could that were in the music business at that point, or in radio business, in the artist business. And I did. And then ultimately, when the school year ended and my parents got my grades and they weren't impressed with a couple of D's and a bunch of incompletes, and I moved back home. As soon as I got back home, I immediately sort of did the same. Home being Los Angeles, I immediately tried to immerse myself in any way, shape, or form that I could in the business out here in LA. So I'm talking the early 70s now. So it was a very fertile time, and the
Mm-hmm.
business was vibrant, and was very receptive to new folks trying to get in and get in the game. But yeah, I mean, it was that love and desire is what drove me. I
That's
hope
great.
that answers the question.
Yes, very well said.
Mm.
Well, Ed, it has been wonderful having you on 3Q tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and our audience, and I hope that we get to have a great conversation again soon.
You
And
and
to
me
my
both.
3Q, yes. And to my 3Q listeners, I know you enjoyed hearing from Ed just as much as I enjoyed speaking with him. Stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.
Cheers. And I'm also doing some artist services stuff that involves some international.